Welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring this collection of prayers, these deeply personal expressions from Supplications by Baha'u'llah. And, these aren't just like rote recitations, they offer a real glimpse into someone's inner life, their relationship with the divine.
And what's really fascinating about these supplications is that by examining them closely, we can start to uncover recurring themes, the nuances of the language used, and ultimately what these prayers reveal about the person praying and their beliefs.
Right. It's almost like we're getting a chance to like sit down with Baha'u'llah and listen in on this very personal conversation with the divine.
Exactly. It's a rare privilege.
Yeah, and one of the first things that really jumped out at me was just how often he acknowledges God's attributes. And it's not just a passing mention, It's like he's trying to capture the immensity, the vastness of those qualities.
Yes, there's this one phrase, ocean of thy knowledge, that I find particularly striking. It's not simply saying that God is knowledgeable, it's this attempt to convey the vastness, the depth of that knowledge, something beyond human comprehension.
Yeah, and it's like he uses other metaphors too, like describing God's mercy as clouds and grace as this radiant sun. It's like he's reaching for language that can somehow reflect, even just a little bit, the grandeur of these qualities.
And that connects to this broader idea that we see in many spiritual traditions, this attempt to articulate, to give language to the divine, the infinite, using human language which is inherently limited.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how we can even begin to perceive and connect with something that's so beyond our understanding.
It's a profound question, and one that many spiritual seekers have grappled with throughout history.
So even though these words come from a specific faith tradition, the Baha'i faith, the underlying sentiment is something that so many people can relate to, right? That idea of grappling with the mystery of a higher power.
Absolutely. And that leads us to another theme that's woven throughout these supplications, this yearning for nearness to God. Phrases like Kauthar of nearness. And that refers to the celestial river in Islamic tradition that's associated with paradise and paradise of reunion. It's such a powerful expression of longing.
Yeah, those phrases really stood out to me too. They're so poignant, almost like love poems in a way, expressing this longing for that intimate connection with the divine.
And what's interesting is that this yearning for nearness can be interpreted on multiple levels. On one hand, it could represent a desire for comfort, protection, a sense of belonging in the face of hardship, but it can also suggest a deeper spiritual thirst, a yearning for enlightenment, or a more profound understanding of God's will and purpose.
It's fascinating how one phrase can hold so many layers of meaning, like each word is imbued with this longing and spiritual significance.
That's one of the things that makes these supplications so compelling. They invite us to contemplate those deeper layers of meaning, to consider the various ways that we seek connection with something beyond ourselves.
And as I was reading these supplications, I also noticed this incredible vulnerability that runs alongside that longing for nearness. Baha'u'llah repeatedly acknowledges his own limitations, his poverty, his powerlessness, his lowliness, constantly emphasizing his need for guidance.
I find that incredibly powerful, actually. This isn't a spiritual leader projecting this image of infallibility. This is a human being standing before God, acknowledging his flaws, his weaknesses. It's a level of honesty that I think really resonates deeply.
It's like he's saying, I'm not coming to you with pride or arrogance. I'm coming with empty hands and open heart, seeking your mercy, your guidance.
Exactly. And that humility, that recognition of our own limitations, is a recurring theme in many, many spiritual traditions. It's often seen as a prerequisite for spiritual growth, a willingness to surrender our ego and allow ourselves to be guided by a higher power.
And that brings us to another theme that's interwoven throughout these supplications, the pleas for assistance. It's so direct, so heartfelt, like we're witnessing a soul bearing itself before the divine.
He asks for protection from enemies, steadfastness in his faith, the fulfillment of his needs. And what strikes me is that these pleas aren't just about personal gain. They're often framed within this broader context of serving God's purpose and contributing to the betterment of humanity.
Yes, like in that passage. Shelter us, O Lord, neath the wing of thy bounteous beneficence. Protect us from such of thy servants as have denied thy name, the all-glorious. He's not just asking for protection for himself. It's for those who share his faith, those who are striving to live a righteous life in a world that often opposes them.
Absolutely, and that brings up a crucial point. These supplications aren't divorced from the context of Baha'u'llah's life and the challenges he faced. He lived in a time of intense religious and political upheaval. His teachings, which emphasized unity, equality, the elimination of prejudice, were often met with resistance and even persecution.
So when we hear him pleading for protection, steadfastness, It's important to remember that he's speaking from a place of lived experience. These aren't just abstract concepts, they're pleas born out of a genuine need for strength and guidance in the face of very real adversity.
Precisely. And I think that's what makes these supplications so powerful. They're not abstract theological treatises. They're the heartfelt cries of a soul seeking comfort, strength, and direction in a world that can often feel chaotic and even hostile.
Okay, so we've touched upon these themes of recognizing God's attributes, this yearning for nearness, the acknowledgement of human weakness, and these pleas for assistance. And throughout all of it, I just keep coming back to the sheer beauty and depth of the language. It's so evocative, it's almost like reading poetry.
Yes, and the imagery and metaphors he uses are incredibly powerful. They create these vivid pictures in our minds, drawing us into the emotional landscape of his spiritual journey.
Like in that line, melodies of thy most exalted pen, it's not just about God's words, it's about the beauty and power of those words, almost like a divine music that resonates deep within the soul.
Yes, that's a great example. And this use of metaphor isn't accidental. It's this deliberate choice to convey complex spiritual concepts in a way that can be felt, can be experienced on a deeper level.
It's like he's trying to awaken our hearts and minds to the presence of the divine, to help us feel that connection in a more tangible way.
Exactly, and that's a key takeaway for me. These supplications aren't just about asking for things. They're about cultivating a deeper awareness of God's presence in our lives, about nurturing that relationship through language, through imagery, through this heartfelt expression.
And as we delve deeper into these supplications, I think we'll encounter even more powerful expressions of that relationship. We'll gain more insights into the complexities of Baha'u'llah's spiritual journey, and we'll encounter more of that stunning imagery that really draws you in.
As we continue exploring these supplications, there's this other theme that emerges, and it's the acknowledgement of tribulation. The hardships, the oppression, and even those who've turned away from God.
Yeah, it's like he's not shying away from that darkness, but actually confronting it head on.
Exactly.
And there's a line that really captures this. The wrathful scourge of the world and the ascendancy of the nations were powerless to withhold him from drawing near to thy most exalted horizon. It speaks to this unwavering commitment, even when surrounded by chaos.
It really does. And that brings up this question of how suffering and adversity can shape faith.
Yeah.
Many traditions, not just the Baha'i faith, view these trials as refining fire, a means of purification and spiritual growth. Think about the stories of Job or the trials of the Buddha. There's this sense that wrestling with difficulty, it can lead to a deeper understanding, a deeper connection.
So these supplications aren't just about seeking comfort or escape from those hardships, but also about finding strength and meaning within them.
Exactly. And that leads us to a related theme, which is these repeated pleas for steadfastness.
Yeah.
Phrases like, make us steadfast, O Lord, in thy love amid all that thou hast created, point to this constant battle to remain true to one's beliefs, especially when you're facing these very real challenges.
It's almost like he's acknowledging that faith isn't this static thing. It's an ongoing journey, this active choice that we make each and every day.
Yes. And that choice, that commitment to steadfastness, it resonates across many spiritual traditions, not just the Baha'i faith. It's about resisting temptation, grappling with doubt, and ultimately it's about finding that inner strength to persevere.
And it's interesting, even though these supplications were written centuries ago, the themes that we're uncovering feel so incredibly relevant to our lives today, don't you think?
Absolutely. The search for meaning, the struggle to remain true to our values in such a complex world, these are timeless human experiences. And these supplications, they offer us this glimpse into how one individual navigated those challenges, seeking solace and guidance from a higher power.
And the way that he expressed in those struggles, it's just so captivating. I keep coming back to the sheer beauty of the language, the imagery that he uses.
Oh, absolutely.
For instance, that phrase, "Lot tree of thy oneness," it's just so evocative.
It is. And it speaks to the power of metaphor and symbolism in spiritual language. The lot tree is mentioned in various scriptures. It holds this special significance, often symbolizing spiritual enlightenment or the divine presence.
So he's not just saying God is one, he's creating this image of this sacred tree rooted in divine unity, offering shade, offering sustenance.
Right.
It's almost like he's inviting us to sit under that tree and contemplate the meaning of oneness.
Exactly. And that's what makes these supplications so rich. They engage our emotions, they engage our imaginations, and they draw us into this deeper experience of the divine.
And there's another phrase I keep coming back to. Shelter us, O Lord, neath the wing of thy bounteous beneficence. Just this very powerful image of seeking refuge, seeking protection.
That image of seeking shelter under a wing, it evokes this sense of safety, of vulnerability, and complete trust in a higher power.
Right.
It taps into this primal need for security that we all share, this yearning for something to protect us from the storms of life.
It's interesting, even though some of these requests are very specific to Baha'u'llah's circumstances, there's this underlying universality that just shines through.
Absolutely. We might face different trials, we may express our faith in different ways, but those core human emotions of longing, of fear, of hope, of gratitude, they transcend any one belief system. They're the common threads that are woven into the tapestry of the human experience.
And speaking of those shared experiences, Baha'u'llah doesn't shy away from addressing the darkness that exists in the world, right? This oppression, this cruelty, the turning away from the divine.
That's right.
It's a sobering reminder that faith isn't always a comfortable or easy path.
It's true, and that's where the theme of steadfastness becomes even more crucial. These supplications, they show us how Baha'u'llah sought strength to persevere, to remain true to his beliefs, even when he was confronted with those harsh realities of the world.
You know, as we go deeper into these supplications, I'm noticing this recurring theme of Baha'u'llah pleading not just for himself, but for the well-being of others, especially for his followers. And it just speaks volumes about his leadership, his compassion.
Yes, and that's such a vital part of his message, this interconnectedness, this sense of responsibility for the well-being of all. It's a vision that extends beyond individual salvation to embrace this hope for collective progress and unity.
And there's this passage that so beautifully embodies this. He says, "Enlighten those servants of thine who have been neglectful of thy remembrance and praise, who have failed to recognize him who is the orient of thy revelation and the dayspring of thy verses, and who have endeavored to lead astray thy loved ones who have set out for the farthest abode and furthermost goal."
It's this powerful call for understanding, for reconciliation,
Yeah.
recognizing that even those who have strayed, they have the potential to find their way back. It's this message of hope, of forgiveness, a reminder that spiritual growth is a journey, and that everyone is capable of finding their path.
It's inspiring to see how Baha'u'llah's personal journey of faith wasn't just this private sanctuary, but this driving force for positive change in the world.
And that's a really potent lesson for all of us, wouldn't you say? That our beliefs, they can be this wellspring, not only of personal strength, but also a driving force for a more just and compassionate world.
Absolutely. And it circles back to our initial point that these supplications aren't just words on a page. They offer us this window into Baha'u'llah's heart, his convictions, and ultimately his actions in the world.
And as we continue exploring these themes, the language and the historical context, we're invited to reflect on our own beliefs, our own longings, and how we each navigate this intricate dance between life and faith.
Now, something that keeps surfacing in these supplications is this image of thirst and seeking those waters of divine knowledge or grace.
Well, yes.
It's such a powerful metaphor for our spiritual longing, isn't it?
It is. Thirst is this fundamental human need, and it so beautifully encapsulates that deep yearning for connection, for fulfillment, for something beyond the limitations of our physical existence.
And there's this passage that really resonated with me. It says, "O Lord, I am gripped with the thirst of separation. Give me to drink of the Kauthar of nearness and reunion, proffered by the hands of thy favor, that I may be so overcome by the sweet savor of the wine of thy mercy, that I rise to champion thy cause amidst thy creation, and to pierce the veils of glory which have hindered thy servants from turning toward the horizon of thy beauty."
Wow. And what's so striking about that passage is just the layering of these metaphors. It's not just about seeking knowledge. It's about this yearning for reunion, for that intoxicating experience of divine love, of divine mercy.
Right.
It suggests this state of being so deeply moved, so filled with that divine presence, that it spills over into action, into service, into this desire to help others find that same connection.
It's like he's saying, once I've tasted this profound love, I can't help but share it
Mm.
to help others break through the barriers that prevent them from experiencing it themselves.
Exactly. And that brings us back to another recurring theme that we've been talking about. This acknowledgement of human weakness and the need for divine strength. Baha'u'llah repeatedly expresses his poverty, his powerlessness, his complete dependence on God's grace.
Yeah, it's such a humbling admission, isn't it? It reminds us that no matter how strong, how capable we might think we are, we all need that guidance, that support, especially on our spiritual journeys.
And that recognition, it's not a sign of weakness, it's actually a testament to wisdom.
Hmm.
It's about understanding our limitations and being open to a source of knowledge, a source of power that transcends our own.
There's this beautiful passage where Baha'u'llah says, O Lord, all things testify unto my poverty and to thy wealth, unto my powerlessness and to thy might. It's a stark contrast, highlighting that gulf between our very finite human nature and just the infinite power of the divine.
It's like he's standing before the immensity of God, recognizing his own smallness, yet finding solace and strength in that very act of surrender.
It reminds me of that saying, the closer we get to God, the more we see our own imperfections.
Yes, and perhaps it is in recognizing those imperfections, in acknowledging our need for guidance, that we become more open to receiving God's grace.
That makes me think about the times in my own life when I felt the most lost, the most overwhelmed. And it's often when I'm trying to do everything in my own strength, resisting that need for help. But it's when I finally let go, when I surrender to that need, that's when I feel a sense of peace, a sense of clarity.
That's a beautiful insight, and I think it speaks to the transformative power of humility,
Yeah.
of recognizing that we're not self-sufficient, that we're a part of something much, much larger than ourselves.
And that realization, that sense of interconnectedness, it seems to be at the heart of Baha'u'llah's message, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's about recognizing our shared humanity, our common need for love, for understanding, for connection with something greater than ourselves.
You know, it's fascinating how these supplications, while deeply personal to Baha'u'llah's experience, manage to tap into these universal human longings, the desire for connection, for meaning, for something to hold on to in the face of life's challenges. These are themes that really resonate across cultures and time.
It's the beauty of spiritual language, isn't it? It can
Yeah.
transcend the individual experiences and connect us to something larger than ourselves. It allows us to see our own struggles reflected in the words of others and to find solace in those shared human emotions.
And speaking of those shared experiences, Baha'u'llah's supplications, they don't shy away from addressing that darkness that exists in the world, right? The oppression, the cruelty, the turning away from the divine.
That's right.
It's this stark reminder that faith, it isn't always easy, it's not always comfortable.
It's true. And that's where that theme of steadfastness becomes even more crucial.
Yeah.
These supplications, they show us how Baha'u'llah sought that strength to persevere, to remain true to his beliefs, even when he was confronted with these harsh realities of the world.
There's this particularly poignant line that captures this. He says, Thou seest, O my God, how the oppressors amidst thy creatures and the rebellious amidst thy people have united against thy loved ones.
It speaks to the challenges faced by those who dare to stand for what they believe in, who strive to live according to this higher calling.
Right.
It acknowledges that opposition, that conflict that can arise when one chooses that path of faith, a path of righteousness.
It's a reminder that the path of faith isn't always smooth sailing, that there will be trials and tribulations to overcome.
And yet, even in the face of such adversity, Baha'u'llah's supplications, they remain filled with hope
Right.
and this unwavering commitment to his beliefs. It's a powerful message of resilience. It's a testament to that enduring power of faith to sustain us, even through the darkest of times.
One of the recurring themes that has deeply resonated with me is Baha'u'llah's consistent yearning for nearness to God. It's like this profound longing that just permeates his supplications.
Yes, it's such a powerful expression of that innate human desire for connection, for transcendence, for merging with something greater than ourselves.
Yeah.
This yearning for unity, for a sense of belonging to something larger than our individual selves. It's a truly universal human experience.
And there's this one passage where he says, my God, separation from thee hath destroyed me, and the sorrow of thine exile and the hardship thou hast sustained in thy path hath consumed me. It almost reads like a love poem, doesn't it? This outpouring of emotion, this yearning for closeness that borders on the unbearable.
It does. It
Yeah.
speaks to the depth of his devotion, the intensity of his longing for union with the divine.
And that yearning for nearness, it's not just about seeking comfort or solace, is it? It's also about aligning oneself with the divine will, about becoming an instrument of God's purpose in the world.
Exactly. It's about surrendering to a higher power, allowing oneself to be guided by a wisdom that transcends our limited human understanding. It's about recognizing that we're not separate from the divine, but rather a part of it, and that true fulfillment comes from aligning ourselves with that greater reality.
There's a line that captures this so beautifully. My God, mine ears long to hearken unto that for which they have been created. Deny them not thy melodies and the sweet accents of thy voice. It's like this plea for divine revelation, for guidance, for inspiration.
It is. It's about opening ourselves to the whispers of the divine, allowing that higher wisdom to shape our thoughts, our actions.
Right.
It's about cultivating a state of receptivity, of attunement to the divine frequency that surrounds us.
It's like tuning into a higher frequency, seeking to resonate with that divine harmony, allowing that music to guide our steps.
And that's such a powerful metaphor for spiritual growth, isn't it? It's about aligning ourselves with a higher vibration, a divine symphony that guides us towards truth, beauty, and goodness.
And it seems that this yearning for nearness to God, this desire to align ourselves with the divine will, it translates into action, into a deep concern for the well-being of others.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that our spiritual journey is not just about personal transformation, but about contributing to the betterment of humanity, about working toward a more just and compassionate world.
There's this powerful passage where Baha'u'llah says, "Thou seest, O my God, how the oppressors amidst thy creatures and the rebellious amidst thy people have united against thy loved ones. No land doth there remain where the lamentations of thy lovers and the plaintive cries of thy chosen ones are not heard."
It's this stark portrayal of the challenges faced by those who choose to follow Baha'u'llah's teachings, the persecution, the hardship they endure. It's this heartfelt plea for divine protection, divine intervention, a recognition that the path of righteousness is not always an easy one.
It's a reminder that choosing a path of faith often comes with a price, that standing up for what you believe in can invite opposition and even suffering.
And yet, even in the face of such adversity, Baha'u'llah doesn't advocate for retaliation or violence. Instead, he calls for steadfastness, for perseverance, for continuing to spread that message of love and unity.
There's this beautiful line where he says, "I entreat thee by thy most great name to stretch forth the hand of thy might from the robe of thy power, and therewith deliver thy loved ones."
It's such a powerful image of divine intervention, of God's power being used to protect, to uplift those who are suffering. It's a message of hope, of resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, we can find solace in knowing that a higher power is watching over us.
It's inspiring to see how Baha'u'llah's faith wasn't just a source of personal comfort, but this driving force for social justice and the betterment of humanity.
And that's a powerful lesson for all of us, isn't it? That our beliefs can be this catalyst for positive change in the world, that we have this responsibility to stand up for what's right and to work towards creating a more just and compassionate society.
Absolutely. And it brings us back to that initial point that these supplications aren't just words. They're this window into Baha'u'llah's heart, his convictions, and ultimately his actions in the world.
And as we explore these themes, the language, the context, it's this invitation to reflect on our own beliefs, our own yearnings, and how we navigate the complexities of life and faith.
You know, as we move into this final part of our deep dive into Supplications by Baha'u'llah, I'm struck by just how raw and honest he is in how he approaches God.
It's true.
It's not just about praise or adoration. It's like he's laying bare his struggles, his fears, even his moments of doubt.
You're absolutely right. It's like we're given this incredible access to the most private conversations of his soul.
Right. And what's even more remarkable is that this vulnerability, it doesn't diminish his spiritual authority in any way. If anything, it enhances it.
I think you're right.
There's a passage where he says, my God, the sweet-scented fragrance of thy knowledge hath so enraptured me, and the living waters of thine utterance have so overcome me, that I have forgotten my own self and aught else besides, indeed, all in the heavens and on earth." It's like he's saying this path demands a complete surrender, a willingness to let go of everything, even one's sense of self.
Yes, but also highlighting that the rewards, the experience of divine love, it's worth that sacrifice.
It's fascinating how those who are seen as these spiritual giants still experience these very human struggles.
Right.
It makes me think about those times when, I feel overwhelmed by my own challenges, questioning my own faith. It makes it a little more relatable.
That's a very relatable feeling, and it underscores the point that faith isn't about achieving some state of perfect, unwavering belief.
Right.
It's about navigating those moments of doubt, of vulnerability, and turning to a higher power for strength, for guidance.
And Baha'u'llah doesn't shy away from those moments, does he? He repeatedly expresses this longing for connection, this, as he calls it, thirst of separation, and asks to drink of the Kauthar of nearness.
Right. That's such a powerful image.
Yeah.
It reminds us that even those who are considered prophets, messengers of God, are still human beings who experience doubt, loneliness, and this deep yearning for connection with the divine.
It's good to remember that we're not alone in those moments.
You're absolutely right. And I think Baha'u'llah's willingness to express those struggles, to share his own vulnerability, it's part of what makes his message so compelling. It reminds us that faith is not about pretending to have all the answers. It's about surrendering to a higher power and seeking guidance, especially when we feel lost or uncertain.
Throughout these supplications, I'm struck by how often his personal pleas are kind of interwoven with this concern for the well-being of others, especially his followers. And there's this real profound sense of compassion that comes through.
Yes. And that compassion is a key element of his teachings.
Yeah,
It's not just about individual salvation.
right.
It's about collective upliftment. It's about fostering unity and understanding among all people.
Right.
He sees humanity as interconnected, and he believes in the potential for everyone to find their way back to the light.
There's a passage that beautifully illustrates this. He says, "Thou seest them, O Lord, holding fast the cord of obedience unto thy precepts, and clinging into the hem of the robe of thy mercy. They have turned wholly unto thee, and desire to fulfill what thou hast commanded them in thy scriptures, thy psalms, and thy tablets." It's like he's saying, look upon them with compassion because they're trying their best to follow your teachings.
Right. It's acknowledging those challenges that people face in staying true to their beliefs.
And this plea for protection and guidance isn't limited to his followers, is it?
That's right.
He also asks for God's blessings upon all humanity, even those who opposed him, who opposed his teachings.
I think that's the true measure of his compassion, isn't it? To see the potential for good in everyone, even those who have caused him harm.
Right.
It's about recognizing that we're all on a journey. We all have that capacity for growth and transformation.
And there's a line where he says, I entreat thee by thy most great name to stretch forth the hand of thy might from the robe of thy power, and therewith deliver thy loved ones. It's a very powerful image of divine intervention, of God intervening to protect and uplift those who are suffering.
It's a reminder that even when we feel lost, alone, even when the world seems to be filled with darkness, with despair, there's this higher power at work, this force of love, of mercy that is always reaching out to us.
And it's this belief in a higher power, this belief in the ultimate triumph of good over evil that seems to sustain him through even the most difficult trials.
Absolutely. That faith, that trust in God's wisdom and justice is the source of his resilience. It's his ability to face hardship and suffering with such grace and dignity.
Right.
It's what allows him to see beyond those immediate challenges to a future where peace, unity, and understanding will ultimately prevail.
It's been an enlightening journey exploring these supplications with you.
It has.
Thank you for sharing your insights and helping us unpack these profound expressions of faith.
It's been my pleasure. I always find it so fascinating to delve into this rich tapestry of spiritual traditions to discover those common threads that connect us all.
And as we conclude our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this final thought. What resonated most with you from these supplications? What insights or questions will you carry with you as you continue on your own spiritual journey? Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.